Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Molly Williams, and I'm the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship with the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce. I oversee programming and events here at Innovate Newport and in a few other locations as well. It is so amazing to see this place filled up. So thank you for making the time in your day today. Before we get any further, I did want to just point out the amazing food and beverages in the back. We want this to be a casual atmosphere, so feel free at any time to get up and refresh your drink or grab some food, but just keep in mind we want to do that quietly so that we can hear the panelists. So before we begin, I'd like to say a few things. Innovate Newport is designed to be a co-working space and office and some space. You can rent spaces here as well, but it's also really supposed to be a hub of activity. It's supposed to be a place where entrepreneurs and innovators can gather like this and can access supports and resources and people. So this whole series is about connecting. I want to point out that it was a public-private partnership, so this whole thing came about with a collaboration between the City of Newport and the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce with the support of federal and state EDA. I want to thank particularly Erin Donovan Boyle, who is the Greater Newport Chamber of Commerce president, if she's here. I want to thank Joe Nicholson, who's the city manager. They played an integral role in the vision of Innovate Newport. And I also want to thank Toonie Schartner, who was the first director here and really got it off the ground. Today is the kickoff event for our Industry Spotlight series. So the whole series is designed to spotlight different industries in Rhode Island. There's a lot of amazing work going on, and we want to do that. So this is our first event, the Food and Beverage Spotlight. At the end, we'll show you a slide with our future events. It's every other month, and just even if you're a foodie, we welcome you back to all the other ones as well. So everybody has a name tag. We asked you to put a colored dot on the name tag to identify in what capacity you are here today. So I'm a support organization. We have a lot of different people here representing different capacities, and so the whole point of this is to connect. So I want you to we have cheat sheets around the room, so you can see what green means and what red means. Please reach out and connect with each other. First, can you just raise your hand if you identify as an entrepreneur? Look around the room, see, amazing. Please raise your hand if you identify as somebody who offers services that support entrepreneurs. Excellent. How about investors in the room? Advisors. Great. Somebody from college or university or high schools, colleges? Great. How about just curious citizens? That should be all of us, but all right. So we have a lot of people here. Please connect with each other. I do want to point out a few thank yous. So Kevin Buck over here is our community manager. Thank you, Kevin. I also want to point out our interns, Taylor and Melinda. Where are you, Taylor and Melinda? They have been incredible in helping support the organization of this. I also want to thank our partners who have helped us share and promote the event and share in the vision of supporting entrepreneurs. Thanks to our advisors who really have a pulse on the industries that we're spotlighting and help us talk about who needs to be here. And thanks to our panelists, our moderator, Jamie, and our exhibitors. I hope you got a chance to meet some of the early stage food startups out there. And most importantly, I need to thank my strategic planning committee, who we've been meeting for a while now to talk about what the vision for this particular series could be. And it's been so much fun working with them, and I'm so grateful for their time because they're volunteering their time. Anson Stuckey, thank you. Steve Kirkpatrick, and David Altunian, who could not be here. I think he's in Antarctica. So he would have been here. But thank you to you three. I really appreciate it. Finally, I want to thank our sponsors. We have several series sponsors: People's Credit Union, the Business Development Company, Octo PD, Full Sail Management, and Newport Craft Brewing Distilling Company is going to be sponsoring our beverages for the series, and Island Time Catering Company for our food for the whole series. So we're so grateful to them. Let's give them a round of applause. Also want to thank our event title sponsor, Orbit Motion Systems, and our event sponsor, Newport Flag, for their sponsorship of this particular event. Thank you. Now I'd like to actually invite Jen Holt up to talk a little bit about Orbit Motion Systems, which is a company that specializes in sustainable solutions that upgrade, automate, and transform processes. Please welcome Jen.
I'm just going to be really quick and say thank you for coming. And if you have any type of questions about automation, sustainability, we are here. I'm here, Beth is here, and John is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. All right, so Jamie, thank you so much for being here. Jamie Shapiro is our moderator today. He is currently the CEO of a national brand called Chef's Life. He's also an active consultant in the food and beverage industry in Rhode Island. Jamie, welcome, and I know that you're going to introduce our panelists, so thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Thanks, Molly. So as Molly said, I just want to welcome everybody. This is the first of 6 Industry Spotlight series put on by Innovate Newport, and I'm honored to be the first moderator. We have a great schedule that you'll see at the end of all the other series. And these next few hours I think are going to be pretty magical. We have a great team and panel up here. We have a great audience, and I'm really looking forward to doing this. As I look around the room, I definitely see a very diverse group. I know a lot of people from Boston who came down, New Bedford. People definitely drove more than an hour and a half to get here. I've got some past colleagues that are in the room, and partners, and it's just going to be an amazing showing. We sold out. Thank you, Molly. It's really great to see everybody here. So, I'm not going to really play the role of Trevor Noah from the Grammys, but I do feel like I need to call some people out and just, really set the stage of the different types of people that are here. So, Taylor from Spritzels is here. She just launched her amazing cookies into 1,200 Kroger stores recently, and she came down here from Boston. David Dakadian is here from Eat Drink RI, and David is always in the know of everything food and beverage. So welcome, David. Two experts from the CP industry came down from Boston, Dina and Scott, so look for them. Scott Kumpf is here. He's been involved in some pretty amazing companies that we all know called Yasso, Polar Beverage, Island Oasis, and even Popcorners. So it's great to have him here as a CFO, and we'll talk more about finance. And then lastly, I don't know if Martin Keene is here, the founder of Keene Shoes. And John Spites, amazing Amazon success story here in East Greenwich. The company is called Cooper's Cask Coffee. If you haven't heard of it, look for him and find him later. And lastly, Lisa and her whole team, Luca, and Mike and everybody are here from Hope in Maine, which is just such a critical piece to this ecosystem and why we're here today. So that's just kind of a sample here. Really wanted to share with people a little bit about my background and why I'm here moderating, and then it's really about them, these 5 people that are up here today. As Molly mentioned, I'm the CEO of Chef's Life, which is a company based in San Diego, running the company from here in Rhode Island. I'm based in Portsmouth, and I wanted to just set the stage and let people know this is quite the logo soup here. And I'm not going to go into all the detail, but I've had 25 plus years of experience starting in San Francisco. I started my career early on and got lucky. If you look at the left side, we're going to go clockwise. I got early with Jamba Juice and Cliff Bar, most brands that people have known. And that's really where I started my career. Spent 10 years in the Bay Area working in some pretty cutting edge companies such as the 2 up there. And then I moved here with my wife about 19 years ago, and I got involved with a company called Stirrings, which was then sold by Diageo, which Scott Kumpf was part of that acquisition. And that was a really amazing experience, and it set me up with a variety of other companies here in Rhode Island. You know, when I moved from San Francisco to Rhode Island, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to continue that food and beverage career. Lucky enough, 19 years later, that's all I do. So I've immersed myself in food and beverage after Stirrings, Go Veggie, which is a vegan cheese company, Pre-Mama. Danny Warshay is here in the house from the Nelson Entrepreneurial Center. Pre-Mama started at Danny's class at Brown University. Then I started my own business, Aperture CPG, and you can see a variety of logos and brands, many of which started at Hope in Maine. A lot of brands here in Rhode Island. I worked with Kelly at Craney Squibbs. And then now I'm the CEO of Chef's Life. So enough about me. I definitely have been around, in the industry, and now it's really a chance to listen to 5 amazing panelists and understand sort of the trials and tribulations of what each of them have gone through during their time. So before we get to them, I just want to say that there was quite a few people that put this event on, and we were thinking about who we wanted to put up on the stage and who the panelists would be. And I think if you look back 10 or 15 years ago, I think we would have had a tough time figuring out who to put on the panel. And we had a tough time picking people because the food and beverage industry here has grown so much in the last 10 to 15 years in the time that I've been here. And we're really proud to know that, we have a dream team that we're calling it. And so we're really excited to have Kelly, Carlos, Lauren, Julie, and Brendan up here for our panel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce everybody and tell everybody about each of their companies. And then they're going to talk about some things about sort of the learnings and trials and tribulations of what they've gone through. And then we'll ask them some somewhat tough questions. And then we're going to go back to you all, and we're going to have each of you ask questions and have very sort of an informal dialogue. You might ask a question that others in the audience may be able to answer. So we're going to keep this fairly formal. Before we get started, I just want to share each of their backgrounds. So I'm going to start with Carlos. Absolutely excited to have Carlos Ventura here, who's the CEO and founder of Feast and Fettle, which is based in Providence. Carlos is the CEO and founding partner of Feast and Fettle. It's one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. Under his leadership, the premium direct-to-consumer meal service has seen its size skyrocket by more than 100x since 2018. So Feast and Fettle is based in East Providence. Unlike its competitors in the meal kit industry, Feast and Fettle prepares all meals in-house, delivers them fully cooked. The company has been praised for its home-cooked style meals, philanthropy, and recycling initiatives. As of January of 2024, the company delivers to Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, and New York. Who knows where they're going to deliver next year. In 2022, Feast and Fettle was listed as in the top 2% of Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies. Before diving into the startup world, Carlos spent his time in the investment world. He was a banker with roles at Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. He's committed to philanthropy. He leverages his business as a powerful tool to change, dedicating resources. So welcome, Carlos. Next up is Julie Stelmazik. I said that right. Julie serves as the second director of food strategy for the state of Rhode Island, where she is responsible for the programs and policies which advance the state's food strategy, known as Relish Rhody, which launched in 2017. For those of you who don't know, Rhode Island Commerce is a quasi-public agency, and they offer a full-service economic development organization for the state of Rhode Island. It serves as a government and community resource to help businesses expand in and relocate to Rhode Island. So it's all people keeping the businesses here, right? In Julie's role, she works to accelerate the growth of a regional, equitable, and sustainable food economy. Sorry. I'm going to go back. Just here. And then lastly, Julie holds a BA in Environmental Studies and International Affairs from Northeastern and an MBA from Boston College, Carroll School of Management. She recently had a baby just 5 months ago, her first child. So she's back from maternity leave, so congratulations. Okay, 2 more. So Kelly McShane, the CEO of Granny Squibb Company. Kelly started this company, which is a B Corp certified beverage CPG brand.
Didn't start. I'm not the founder.
Didn't start. So
Teamed up with.
teamed up, exactly. So for those of you who don't know, Granny Squibbs is an iconic Rhode Island organic iced tea company founded in 2009, right? And then Kelly came later. And it started with a recipe back in the 1930s in Saunderstown by Sally Squibb. Granny Squibbs can be found throughout Rhode Island and all of New England in grocery stores, cafes, and sandwich shops, etc. Since taking the position of CEO, Kelly has led the company to 10x revenue growth in 3 years. Pretty amazing. Securing flagship grocery accounts like Whole Foods, Stop and Shop, Market Basket, Big Y, and Hannaford's, and also has partnerships with Brown University and Mass General. Kelly specializes in brand revitalization with a strong emphasis on social responsibility. She serves on the board of the Amos House, Farm Fresh Rhode Island, marketing committee for Save the Bay, on and on. She's also pursuing her MBA at Brown University. And for those that don't know, she's an avid adventurer. She's been swimming with the sharks in Block Island, once with me, and South Africa, and she loves skydiving. So Lauren Abda is the founder and CEO of Branch Food, which is a launch pad for food innovation that is based in Boston and recently expanded to Rhode Island just about 2 years ago. By bringing together all corners of the industry with curated events, industry consulting, and investments, Branch Food connects innovators and fosters growth to transform the food industry. To date, Branch Food has built a community of 18,000 plus innovators, industry experts, corporate leaders, investors. They've hosted over 200 educational events, working with companies like Walmart and PepsiCo, the Boston Beer Company, and they've also invested in over $4 million in 19 early stage companies through the sister company, Branch Venture Group. Lauren is a council member at Tufts University. She is on the board of advisors for the Boston Public Market Association, and she served as a mentor and a judge for Rabobank, MIT, and the Agribusiness Innovation Prize and Mass Challenge. So she has a Master's of Science degree in Food Policy and Applied Nutrition from the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition. So welcome, Lauren. And last but not least, Brendan O'Donnell. So Brendan is the CEO of Newport Craft Brewing and Distillery here in Newport. Originally from the bustling quarters is where his career started in Wall Street. And he transitioned his expertise to the world of hospitality in 2015, joining Stanton & Bowery Hospitality Group as a partner and head of operations. After leaving Wall Street, probably a good move, right? In 2017, Brendan pivoted to Audrain Hospitality Group, where he orchestrated the acquisition of Newport Craft Brewing and Distilling. This led to significant expansions. They bought the Braven Brewery and Radiant Pig Craft from Brooklyn, New York. And then under his leadership and stewardship, Newport Craft has been recognized for producing the nation's 9th best rum and top-rated whiskey in New England. So pretty amazing. So one of his hallmark achievements, if you haven't seen it, or if you've driven by it recently, is the recent $27 million expansion of Newport Craft, which increases the brewing and distilling capacity by tenfold. The revamped building has amazing views of the bridge, tasting pavilion, expansive private event, and it's just going to be amazing. Brendan's dedication to the community is evident in his active roles on the boards of Roanoke Business College and also working with Newport O'Donnell's Art Dedication Museum. So obviously, being the dream team, that was quite an intro for everybody, and we're really excited to hear more from you. So I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to start up. Julie, I'm just going to go right into you with time, and we're just going to go right into the background of the industry, and then we'll hit everybody. So just like 4 or 5 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Do you mind
Yeah.
holding okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. You
Okay.
sure?
Yep.
So I'll just briefly kind of orient everyone. It doesn't feel like the mic's on.
Lean into the mic.
Lean into the mic. Oh, I can. Yeah,
there you
wow.
go.
All right. Ooh. Powerful. So yeah, I guess I just want to orient everyone to Rhode Island's food economy. We work very closely with the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, which is a nonprofit networked organization that supports all parts of the food system. And they did some really great work about trying to really get a data dashboard going about different measurements across the food system. So one of the things that they did, I just want to credit them on this summary, is really understanding the size of Rhode Island's food economy. So we are a small state. We sit within a $4 trillion economic corridor. I think that's why a lot of companies find this place as an opportunity for distribution, aggregation, et cetera. Even though we're a small state, our food system overall, this full spectrum of the food supply chain from production, processing, all the way to disposal, makes up an enormous part of our state's GDP. It's about 20% of economic activity tied to the food system overall. And for all of those of you in the room that understand the way the food systems work, it's very interconnected, right? You can't have one piece without another. And so that's an enormous opportunity, and I think a strategic advantage that Rhode Island has in its smallness. It supports 60,000 jobs, most of those actually in hospitality. And of that $12 billion food economy, about $8 billion is actually distribution and aggregation. And Jamie asked me to think about some challenges or potentially opportunities, right? And I think that there's an enormous opportunity to get these early and mid-stage companies into that more conventional distribution and aggregation system. There's such great work happening in Rhode Island around market access and getting local food production, CPG companies to institutions and more regional and national market channels, but there's so much more to do, and I think that this just kind of shows that opportunity. Pause or keep going? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you want me to just talk about the food economy there. And then, so Jamie mentioned my role within Rhode Island Commerce, but the design of the position of the food strategy was really to serve as an interagency position, knowing that regulations, legislation, permitting, issues around health equity, food access, environmental issues, and agriculture, fisheries, these are all connected, and they often get siloed across different parts of government. And so in 2017, under the Raimondo administration, a state food strategy was launched called Relish Rhody by my predecessor, Sue Enderbrock. And it laid out these kind of 5 focuses to work on. And so we are now in the process of developing a new plan, which is really exciting. And I invite you all to be part of that. We're in the understanding phase. But I just want to call out one focus that I think will come up in today's discussion, and that is around second stage food businesses, what we're calling second stage. Some of the challenges that emerged back in 2017 and I think persist today is that there's so much entrepreneurship happening thanks to Hope in Maine, thanks to SCG, thanks to Innovate Newport, CIC, TownMade, the list goes on. And these companies are finding success, right? But once they grow, what's next, right? And what has been made clear to us is that there needs to be these 4 things that Lisa, right, always educates us on. Access to market, market channels, infrastructure, thinking about things like co-packing, the hard infrastructure, technical assistance, and access to capital. And when you see the companies that fail or succeed, it seems to be around not just one of those, but all 4. And so, so my hope is that Rhode Island Commerce and the role that the public government agencies can play is in working with industry, academia, and innovators to figure out how we can help these companies stay in Rhode Island. And later I can talk more about some of the ways we're doing that. And this is kind of just the way that I orient and understand Rhode Island's unique ecosystem. Because we're so small and we sit within this big economic corridor, so much action, there's so much excitement here around food, right? We have 400 miles of coastline. We've got an incredible fisheries industry. We've got dynamic food industry, right? Value add, processing, and there's just a lot of opportunity here. And so I think that you will see, I just kind of want to like give the floor to the others. I'm the only one on the panel, not from a business. And I guess just the point I want to make is that we at Commerce are excited to be kind of behind the scenes supporting the companies and the intermediaries on the ground doing the good work. And so Secretary Tanner, our Liz Tanner of our Secretary of Commerce understands this as a really big opportunity, and we've been working to figure out how to drive more funding into the food sector. All right.
All right. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and meet all of you. I look forward to hearing more from the crowd, honestly, through the discussion that we'll be having this evening. But, I think the government is such a point of validation for a lot of the work that I think we do in the private sector in many ways. And I think on behalf of Rhode Island Commerce, as Julie had mentioned, we've been collaborating with them to understand more specifically the needs of this sort of stage 2 food entrepreneur and innovator community and really provide resources and collaboration. One thing Julie didn't mention is my favorite statistic about Rhode Island, which I think you shared at the Rhode Island Food Systems Summit last year, which is, or maybe 2 years ago now. Rhode Island, well, I should say, the United States is the largest agricultural exporter in the world, raw agricultural products, commodities. The second is often a surprise to people. It's actually the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is because they've implemented so much technology around food and innovation. And so Rhode Island, being 1/16 the size of the Netherlands, we believe has an enormous opportunity to be a leader in not only feeding the community locally, but also exporting to other places in the US and potentially the world. So how does Branch Food fit into that? So as Jamie had mentioned, we're a launchpad for food innovation. And we really work to support programmatically and by way of community to accelerate innovation in the food industry. And we do that in 3 main ways. Through our programmatic work, we have a lot of events that serve to both help people network and get educated on how to launch and grow and scale their food-related companies. We do work with consumer product brands, but we also work with people that are launching new technologies, new products, new services into the food industry, which oftentimes those people don't always have backgrounds in food. And so helping them understand how the food industry works is a big part of what we seek to do. In addition to that, we have an annual conference, Food Edge, which falls under the programmatic work as well. But what I'm really here to talk to all of you about today is our work at Branch Venture Group. And that's really the investment network that we've built since 2017 to help support companies at their earliest phases of development that are looking to raise funding at their pre-seed or seed stage financing rounds. So we can go to the next slide. And so in order to help orient you to our work and what we do, because I think there's a misconception that investors just sit around all day and think about deals and give companies money, there's a lot more that goes into it. And I think the more that goes into it is important for emerging companies and people in the industry to hear, because that's how then you interface with the work that we do and help really accelerate the collective community of entrepreneurs to really meet the goals that they seek to achieve. So we spend a lot of our time sourcing deals, and we look nationally across the United States to be able to source, again, products, technology, services. What are people bringing to market that serve to provide a differentiator within a beverage category, like what Granny Squibbs is doing, what people are doing to create new systems for agriculture, what Gotham Greens has built, and what the Rhode Island government has brought here to Rhode Island to help evolve the ways we produce food in state. Really working with those entrepreneurs and finding the best fit for the type of funding that we provide. And I think that's an important thing to remember, because we are early stage investors, and we look at companies that are raising anywhere from $500,000 to $3 million and are looking for $10,000 checks, $500,000 checks. And so they're very much thinking about, how do I fund my company at the earliest phases to get to that next point in time where I can go and raise a more substantial round of financing to then take me to the next sort of phase of development. So sourcing is something we spend a lot of time thinking about and would welcome any deals and opportunities you think we should look at here in Rhode Island or elsewhere. We're always an open door in that way. In terms of our due diligence, we spend a lot of time understanding companies, understanding the opportunity, and that's related to everything from spending time with the entrepreneur, spending time with the founding team, really doing the market references, those management references, getting to know the vision of the founder, because the better we understand their business, the more we can actually help. And returning back to that 18,000 person community, once a business once we've understood what that business wants to do, is really how we seek to add value over time. Through our process, we do a lot of calls, we produce a lot of research, and that research effectively is what gives us conviction around the investment opportunity. And so collaborating with obviously the entrepreneurs and the references they give us, but also speaking to people in the community and understanding from you all, what opportunities do you see in this space? Are there other perspectives that we should be considering as it relates to this business and what they're trying to do? I have 1 minute. Okay. Moving through due diligence. So for us, again, when it comes down to the decision around financing a company, we want to see really good legal documentation around the opportunity. We want to know that the entrepreneurs and the team have worked with really good legal counsel to be able to craft their term sheet, establish a structure that really benefits both the investor and the entrepreneur. I mean, we read a lot of term sheets, and they're not always a win-win scenario. And so we work really hard to establish situations in which both the entrepreneur and the investor win, or they both lose. And I think that that's incredibly important to set that standard in this industry. And then lastly, post-closing, as I mentioned before, our network becomes incredibly valuable, again, not only from a deal flow perspective, but in terms of then how we help the company. Once they obtain the financing, they have these metrics to reach, they have these milestones. How can we lean into our community and collaborate to be able to help accelerate those goals and that development to get the company continuing to grow and scale? So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Kelly. I work for Granny Squibb's Organic Iced Tea. First, I want to say how grateful I am to both Commerce and Branch Foods. We have been recipients of assistance from both of them, so Julie and Laura, thank you very, very much. So Jamie did a good job of talking about how Granny Squibb's got started. It was a recipe developed in the 1930s in Saunderstown by Sally Squibb. Her granddaughter, Robin, founded the company in 2009, and she did a really great job getting the iced tea into grab-and-go accounts and markets in Rhode Island. And then in 2018, my partner and I teamed up with her, and in 2019, we actually worked with Jamie Shapiro to create a really aggressive growth plan, and so then hired him on to be CEO, and you actually multiplied our accounts by 2,000. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 2,000%. And then, so we were off to the races in 2020 when COVID hit. That really, when the restaurants shut down, that was a big hit to the company. But we made it through, and unfortunately, a lot of brands our size had to shut our doors. But what came out of that was shelf space. So we came off running, and then since then, we've been doubling sales every year. Today, our iced tea, we are organic, we are vegan, we are B Corp certified and women owned. We have distribution throughout the North Atlantic region. And we have accounts like Whole Foods, Stop and Shop, Market Basket. This year, we're launching into Big Y, Hannaford's, and Costco in June. We'll be expanding into the Northeast region this summer, which is very, very exciting. One thing we're extremely proud of is our community support. So this slide I could, and trust me, I want to talk about all day, but I know I only have 2 minutes. This is very important to our company. We exist to support our community. So Every new flavor that we come out with, we match it with a different New England state and then a nonprofit from that state, and have pledged a portion of our proceeds. We have a campaign called If We Can, We Will, where any Rhode Islanders can reach out about anything, from an iced tea donation to a dog walk to, during COVID, women and infants asked us to make plexiglass shields that went between doctors and patients, and we did it. We're extremely proud to say that we've helped 100% of applicants. We teamed up with a restaurant called Troop to create a cocktail and have raised over $50,000 for organizations that are fighting for social justice in our state. So that is our community involvement. If anyone has any questions, please, I want to talk about it all the time. But, and then Jamie asked us to talk about some pain points of the company, and you know, I really want to piggyback on what Julie said. We have a lot of support in this state for entrepreneurs, for food and beverage entrepreneurs in the beginning. But once they get to stage 2, there's a lack of beverage manufacturing here. And so Julie and Commerce and SEG and, you know, Branch Foods have all, and Hope in Maine have all been coming together to really try and ramp that up. And we're really excited. We're hoping to have co-packing here. Granny Squibb, since the beginning, has been made, it was made in New Jersey, and now it's made in New York, which is like, it hurts my heart to say that. We need to be made here. The company's here. Our heart is here. So hopefully by, thanks, Doris, by this summer, we'll have co-packing here. So I'm looking forward to talking a lot about that during this panel, and excited to be here. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to Jamie and Molly. Putting on this kind of event is not easy, and selling it out is extremely impressive. Another thank you to Julie and the Rhode Island Commerce Corp. We would not have been able to do our construction project without you guys, and they really do walk the walk and talk the talk. It's unbelievable. Couldn't be better to deal with. And then anyone that's an entrepreneur in here, I think has to thank their partner as well, because you do, as an entrepreneur, you're working odd hours all the time. It's never like a 9 to 5, and the person that suffers the most or has to make the most sacrifices is the partner. So I want to thank my wife, Tessa, who's here tonight, too, before I get started. I'm from New Jersey originally, and I never imagined myself being able to be an entrepreneur. And I did not ever think I would end up in Rhode Island either. My entire family went to Boston College, and I went to school in the South to Virginia. And I didn't know what it took to be an entrepreneur. I read about it, I saw movies about it, but I didn't really know what it meant. And when my wife and I came up here to take a vacation in 2015, I decided to never leave because we fell in love with Newport and Rhode Island and all the opportunity. As someone that had just gotten into hospitality, seeing things like Hope in Maine were a huge inspiration. Mark Hellendrung from Narragansett and carrying them at my bar in New York, I was just kind of blown away by the amount of opportunity and the people that were here. Coming into a new town, because Newport's a town, even though it has a big name, it's still a town. It's a small place. It's pretty daunting when you want to open your own business, especially being an outsider. So the first thing that we tried to do, or I tried to do, was form a relationship with a lot of the community members, specifically Joe Nicholson from City Manager. During the entirety of our construction project, I've gone to, I think, 39 city council meetings, and we've had 4 mayors. So we've had a lot of change, which is good, but it's also, there's a lot of policy change that goes with that, whether it's a moratorium or pandemics or all sorts of things that come up, because at the end of the day, with what I was doing was, I had never built a brewery before. I'd never built a distillery before. I didn't really know how to, but the thing that I had was the ability to find people that had the experience. And with the pandemic, we kind of leaned into what our obstacles were. And the biggest obstacle that we had was, how are we going to convince the city of Newport or the town of Newport to let us build this facility? How are we going to get funding for it? How are we going to find people to buy into it? And how are we going to break seasonality in a seasonal town? And the first thing we needed to solve too is, we don't ever want to do anything unless we can be the best in the world at it. So how am I going to be the best in the world at something that I've never done before? And there's also 11,000 other breweries in the country, about 28,000 in the world, and distilleries were on the up and up. So I quickly was questioning my moving to Rhode Island after we started getting involved in this, because I didn't know if I got too over my head. But what we did was we listened and we learned from a lot of people, and specifically locally, we found out why people wanted to come to our brewery or distillery and why they didn't. What worked with distribution and what didn't. What were the laws of direct to consumer, and what were the laws within every state. So we started started to lean into all these things that we didn't really know about, and then used obstacles like the pandemic to relocate people from all over the country. The pandemic was awful, but a lot of people got laid off, and we relocated 13 people from all over the country. 4 of them have bought their first homes here, and I think all 4 of them now have started to raise families here and have had kids at Newport Hospital, which is really cool. So those are some of the things that I'm personally really proud of, but they were also some of the most talented people. I'll wrap up in a second, but pretty much what I'm trying to say with the entrepreneurship side and what we're doing is we're always in a state of learning, we're always in a state of adapting, and then once we've kind of found out who we are going to be, we've leaned into it and we try to be the best in the world at it. So look forward to getting into more details on that.
How's it going, everybody? I'm Carlos. Thank you, everybody, for first of all coming to this event. I see a lot of familiar faces. I probably delivered to several of your households. Feast and Fettle has a very interesting story, and I think back to 2018 when I came. I'll say back to Rhode Island because I have some set of roots here. My wife is from Rhode Island. A lot of my closest friends are from Rhode Island. And I was just leaving a startup in London called Deliveroo. And so Deliveroo was essentially the Uber Eats in Europe. And I worked right alongside the CEO. We raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and we spent hundreds of millions of dollars. And it wasn't fun. I didn't want to do it. I didn't agree with the CEO's approach. We got along, but we just executed in different ways. I'm more of an old school, hey, build the business the right way type of guy. And then I also realized how difficult the food business is. It's extremely difficult. Everybody knows food businesses have super thin margins. So if you're not executing extremely well, forget it. So my mind was, yes, I want to be an entrepreneur, but it was certainly not on the food space at all. And then I got a call from one of my best friend's wives, Maggie, and I knew what they were doing. I knew they were based out of Rhode Island, and they were based out of this incubator kitchen. I come to learn the name of it was Hope in Maine, and they had about 20 customers. They were serving for almost 2 years. And I look at the numbers and I'm like, wow, how did they maintain this customer base? This is crazy. Because they had 20 customers, but they weren't leaving. And the retention in this business isn't great, in the meal delivery, meal subscription business. So I was intrigued, but I still wasn't sold. So I came back to Rhode Island, and I went down to Hope in Maine, and sat with Maggie and Nikki. So Nikki is Maggie's best friend, original co-founders of the business. And I seen what they were doing, and I was shocked at the level of quality and the level of convenience that they were providing. Yes, it was a small scale, but I knew that no one else was going to try to scale that. And that was the intriguing part of it. So that was January of 2018. And I don't know if I came into the state overly optimistic, but I figured, hey, I have a background as an investment banker. I'm going to come into a small state. We have a decent, opportunity here. Let's, raise some money. We knew we were going to have to raise some money. I thought it was going to be a lot easier than what it eventually became. So it wasn't easy, and we didn't raise money for quite a while. And we bootstrapped it, and we grew the business organically. I see Anat over there. She's one of our first members. I've delivered to her house as well. But I think there is a inherent discipline in building a business like that and not relying on capital and fine-tuning your product and understanding your customer and what they really want. And so the way I think about Feast and Fettle and why we've remained fully vertically integrated is because I think back to what Maggie did when she made meals for people in their homes. She left the meals packaged in the refrigerator and she left. And so we're trying to replicate that same notion at scale. So we've always talked about, how we're trying to constantly delight our members, whether that's with the product itself or with the service. And I have this slide up here about our growth trajectory, because from Q1 of 2016 all the way through, I don't think we really figured out how to scale until like Q4 of 2019. But that's where everything actually was figured out. By the time we were ready to scale, we knew what we wanted to scale. And what I mean by that is you learn so much in the beginning. You learn so much about your customers and their needs and how to tweak the product. It's awesome when you know exactly what you want to scale and you're like, all right, I just need the technology and I just need the capital to do this. And that's what we felt like for I don't know, 2 years before I joined and then another 2 after I joined. So 4 years of just trying to essentially figure it out. And so what happened was, as you can imagine during COVID, we coincidentally figured out our marketing strategy, like I said, around Q4 of 2019. And so we're going right into 2020, guns blazing, excited. And COVID happened, and there was just this kind of silence for 2 weeks. And since then, it's just kind of been like a crazy ride. And I want to go to the next slide because this is what happens. This is behind the scenes, right? This is all the shit that just sucks, right? Like, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're either living like up here or down here. There is no like average day where you just stroll into the office and your energy is just balanced throughout the day and you go home and you see your family. And like, that's just not like the lifestyle that we live, and I don't want to portray that. And so I talk about some of these issues that we've had. Couldn't pay ourselves, couldn't raise capital. Investors saying we're too early stage, investors saying we're too late stage. Constant self-doubt is a big one, because you'll come off of like a phenomenal win, and then the next day, you're just, for whatever reason, you're not feeling that same way. So this slide is for the entrepreneurs out there. It like seems kind of dark, but it's actually, check. It's kind of like if all of these things are happening, then you're most likely on the right trail. So that's how I'll end my segment.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty with the panel discussion. I'm just going to share a very brief story. Raise your hand if you've heard of BevNet, big industry magazine. So I'm friendly with Jeff Kleiman, who is the editor-in-chief. Sent him a little note the other day. I was like, gosh, what do you do as a moderator? Like, give me some pointers. Jeff is like the king of moderating all these different events that he does. And he sent me a note back, and he said, and he was pretty quick, and he said, play point guard, not small forward or shooting guard. Facilitate, but don't be afraid to cut people off. So I'm going to end with the last one. We have 5 really good questions. We have some other questions if we have time. And so I'm just going to ask each panelist, just to be brief, these are questions that I think the audience is going to really be excited to hear the answers to. And I'm going to start with Kelly first. And so Kelly with Granny Squibs, I think it's important for you to share with us a specific moment that forced you to quickly scale up or grow your business. Some people call this the scale or die moment. And so why don't you just share with us and tell us one of these moments that you had in that scale or die situation.
Like moment today, because we have those every single day.
Or yesterday, or...
Okay, I have one. Can you hear me? Look at that. Okay, so in 2022, we got an email one night from our longtime co-packer saying that they were restructuring and could no longer handle our orders. This was in May. We sell iced tea. This was right before our high season. So after like a half hour of freaking out and crying and whatnot, we started looking for co-packers in New England, and we realized that there were no organic certified big batch bottling co-packers in all of New England, which is Bananagrams, which we'll talk about later. But so we ended up signing on with this co-packer in New York called Mayer Brothers, which tripled our freight costs. It's very far away, like up by Niagara Falls. So our co-packer, Wayne County, their minimums were 1,500 gallons. And this new co-packer, which was the closest we could find, was 12,000 gallons. So we had to make 10 times the amount of iced tea that we were making before. And we have a shelf life, albeit a long one. It's 18 months. But we really had to ramp up our sales. So we just went to town on sales. We have James Zangi right here, who's amazing. He's the best ever. Don't take him from us. And we hired Lee Phillips from Honest Tea. And we went from 6 Whole Foods, 3 in Rhode Island, 3 in Mass, to all 38 in the region. That's when we really reached out to Stop and Shop and Market Basket. Before, we had kind of been focusing on the grab and go accounts, and we were like, no, we need that volume. So I think that was a big kind of scale or die moment, and we did okay.
And what's the moment today? No, just kidding. So Brendan, you're up next. So, talk to us a little bit about scaling the business. You obviously have scaled Newport Craft for over the years, but when you think about cash flow perspective and what strategies you had or considerations that were crucial to the whole process over these years.
I mean, cash flow is the most important thing in our business, and we use our budget as a map because that's really what it is. When we bought what was formerly Newport Storm, one of the things that they did that was pretty brilliant was that it was a seasonal business, but it was a brewery and a distillery. And a distillery has to put their product down if it's aged for a certain amount of time. So you're not going to realize the gains on that for sometimes multiple years. So it ties up your cash flow. They were using their cash flow from the beer side to pay for the spirits. When we bought them, a lot of about 1,100 barrels of spirits were at 5 to 8 years old. So we didn't have to worry about tying up our cash in spirits, which is historically a really expensive thing to do. But we wanted to kind of look at what are the revenue streams that we have? Because from what I knew, if you're making beer and you're only distributing it, you're only relying on checks that are coming from a distributor, which they're usually late. So if they send a 30-day term check after 60 days, that could be the difference between me hitting payroll or not hitting payroll. So we wanted to find as many revenue streams as we possibly could. I saw this opportunity when we acquired Radiant Pig and Braven, where of the 11,000 breweries that are in the country, about 72% of them that are trying to distribute their products actually contract it out, so they co-pack. That's a great way to get your business started, and frankly, it's what you really have to do. But what it does is it puts the pressure on the company in a lot of ways, because they were held at hostage more or less by the distributor. They had to pay COD, and then if they went out of stock, they pissed off their customer. And they also didn't have any real assets. So what we wanted to do is we acquired these IP brands and the people, and that we brought them into our home, and we broke the seasonality of Newport by having New York, which is busy year-round. We brought on the founders, but more importantly, when we bought the IP, we bought the distribution rights and contracts. So we were able to break the seasonality. And we found out that the facility, one of the main reasons why we did the construction was it wasn't built for hospitality, because in 2010, when they built the facility, you weren't actually legally allowed to have third parties come on for tours and events, and there's a lot of restrictions. So now, if we can get cash flow every day, almost like a bar or a restaurant, while respecting the fact that local bars and restaurants are also our clients, we could be getting cash flow every day We can rely on the big hit checks once a month, more or less, from our distributing partners. But instead of just doing it locally in Rhode Island, we're going all the way down to New York and New Jersey so that we're getting it from multiple areas.
Excellent. So I'm going to go quickly into some of these questions, then I'm going to open up some of the questions others can chime in here. I'm going to now go to Carlos, and then Julie and Lauren, you're up. So Carlos, we're talking cash flow positive, we're talking about scale or die. Now let's talk about giving back, right? Philanthropy, which you all and many of the businesses here have been involved in. So tell us, with you and Granny Squibs in particular, giving back is so important. It's a core value of each of your businesses. How have your philanthropic initiatives impacted your business, and why do you consider them key aspects today and ongoing?
Yeah, I can think back to, I think it was around January of 2019 where we didn't have the cash flow yet. We still did it. We were looking for a nonprofit partner that we could scale with. And I think it's really interesting and important when you think about your business and a potential partner you want to work with, and giving back, like what are the goals of that organization and how do they align with the goals of your organization? And I actually don't even remember how I got connected, but I met Navin Salem at Adizia. She gave me a tour of their facility, and granted, I already loved what they represented and everything that they were doing, and I was actually sold on their operation, to be honest. I got a tour of their operation, and I was like, wow, this is very aspirational. It was very motivating. They were based in Rhode Island, but they had a much, I'd say, broader kind of global ambition, and that was important for us because we have also a large ambition as well. And so in my mind, I'm like, hey, if we grow, if we're successful, how can we continue to give back at scale? So very early on, we made the decision to give $1 of every order to Adizia. Luckily, we've been able to sustain that over the years. But everything from Adizia down to kind of the day-to-day involvement in the community that we have, I think genuinely makes the product and service and brand more sticky. So when folks think about Feast and Fettle versus, let's just say, any other meal delivery service, you likely won't see, Blue Apron at your, local town day handing out free samples or donating to, the local hospitals. I remember during COVID, we were making, I was personally making deliveries to every hospital in Rhode Island, and we were feeding some of the workers on the front line. One, it just feels good. It's kind of simple. But two, it actually helps the stickiness and brand definitely resonates much more in the communities you operate in. So we've always taken that approach.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos. So Lauren, let's switch gears now. Let's talk about investing. I know there's some investors in the audience here. Talk to us a little bit about what you think the missing middle is in terms of investors, access to capital, for those emerging food and beverage brands.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say that because it exists, we started Branch Venture Group. So I think what we realized back in 2017 when we started angel investing in this space and doing so in collaboration with other individuals that were, looking to put a meaningful stake into companies that they had a lot of conviction and belief around, was that there was really no one place to go. Where do you go when you're, raising a couple $100,000? Who is going to give you that money? Especially if you don't have that community. You need sort of an entity to go to describe what you're doing and also, provide funding as well as, I think, mostly support. So we formed Branch Venture Group as a way to, identify worthwhile investment opportunities and evaluate them to be able to, put, like I said before, kind of small dollars in the relative scheme of things into these emerging businesses, particularly in the New England area, but we've expanded since. It's interesting. I think you've heard all of the panelists here talk about their working capital needs, right? These are working capital cycles are incredibly hard to fund. You're buying the product, you're trying to sell the product. there are terms, and delays in between where you're getting money into the business. And so who do you go to help kind of along that path? Family, friends, if you have that kind of family and friends, that's great. But if you don't, and you believe, and you're building a product, or you're building a service, or you're building a technology that has true industry value add, significant differentiator in the category, resonates with consumers in a unique, differentiated way, and provides a potentially strong return on investment, then there should be someone and other people that are interested. So that was really the thesis of Branch Venture Group and what we formed. I would say I think the funding community is coming along in terms of understanding how to invest in food-related businesses. I think early stage angels are one place to go, and back to this stage 2, I think funding in many ways, we're still developing that stage 2 sort of source of financing, right? There's angel groups, but then there's venture funds. But to go from angel group to venture fund is a big leap. And, a lot of funds, particularly looking at consumer product brands, won't touch you unless you're doing, $5 million in revenue. But how do you get to $5 million in revenue? And so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources, both on the, kind of coaching, mentor, advisor side, as well as the capital side. And we've seen entrepreneurs have to get very creative. I mean, inventory financing is something that I think we've seen, now come in to provide the needed capital for emerging companies. Obviously, the angels that are part of groups that are largely industry agnostic, but are looking more and more at food as an investment category. We see, and we've been in touch with a lot of those individuals to help them understand as well, how do you evaluate a food-related business for investment? So doing a lot of education in this space and working, in collaboration with partners, I think is how we've tried to address this, lack of access to capital. But I would say we're not there. There's still a tremendous number of companies like the ones here that are doing great work, but still need to find funds. So.
That's great, and it's a really good segue to Julie here. So we keep talking about her second stage, right? So Julie, talk to us a little bit about how Commerce or Rhode Island Commerce supports the second stage. Early stage growth is another name for it. And then, how do you ensure these companies stay here and don't move away? So talk a bit about the second stage support.
Sure. And I just want to say, Carlos, after seeing your slide, I think I'm understanding the connection between skydiving and entrepreneurship. Better you guys than me. I don't have the heart for it. No skydiving for me. So I would say we're learning. We're in that space now where we're trying to understand. We haven't really defined second stage. It means different things in Rhode Island than it does in other parts of the state. In Michigan, the Economic Development Group there worked with the Edward Lowe Foundation. Josh Daly, who's now at the Rhode Island Food Policy Council, helped us connect with that. And they did a really interesting program to understand the market opportunities, what is that cluster, how do we define it, and so that's something that we're looking towards. So we're really kind of in this learning phase, I would say, and we were able to get some federal funding from the EDA to do an economic study of this sector. So that's actually what we're doing now to kind of do a proof of concept to understand what role can the state play in this second stage space. But that is to say, we still do have some programs that have been in place for a while. And so one I want to call on is SupplyRI. Doris Blanchard is right there. She's been at Commerce for a while. And Kaylee Hill, where's Kaylee? So they'll be around after. And SupplyRI was started by Doris and funding from the legislature 8 years ago, maybe. And it was meant to connect these big buyers in the state with Rhode Island businesses. And so they've been targeting different sectors and figuring out what the gaps are. So that's a technical assistance arm. We have a new program at Commerce that's called the Minority Business Accelerator. That was thanks to federal funding that Commerce was able to leverage to support minority businesses, knowing that there's a real gap in supports for minority businesses. So actually, there's a few folks in the room, a few organizations in the room, including Hope in Maine and Branch Food, that will be providing technical assistance, one-on-one coaching, I think space on flexible terms, and there's also direct grants for things like equipment and infrastructure, which is rare. It's difficult to find money for those things. You know, it's easy to get a loan, they say, when you don't need it. And sometimes you really shouldn't get a loan, and that's right. But sometimes you do need a loan, and it's hard to get, and there's an equity issue. So I think we're just trying to, we are in this sense-making space to understand what role can the state really play to support that second stage growth.
It's a new term for a lot of people, I think.
Which one?
Second stage.
Yeah.
Early stage, second
Early
stage.
yeah.
Great, really, really good dialogue here. Kelly, I'm going to throw this one back to you. So, back in my day when I was at Cliff Bar, I learned early on by the founder, Gary Erickson. He told me, competition breeds success. That was a long time ago, and it's always just resonated for me. So, knowing that competition breeds success, how have you and Granny Squibbs handled competition here in Rhode Island? And, you know, what has been your strategies in terms of competition in the space that you're in?
Well, the fact that competition breeds success, I definitely agree with. And it definitely makes all of us, I think, better entrepreneurs, having competitors in our industry. But so on a local level, I would say like our biggest competitors are like Del's and Yacht Club Soda. And, you know, we're really lucky to be in Rhode Island because the food and beverage industry is very, very collaborative here. So both Del's and Yacht Club Soda actually distribute Granny Squibbs as well, and we're sold in the factory store at Yacht Club Soda, which I think is very unique to Rhode Island and pretty extraordinary. So, you know, all of us really, really help each other on a national level. You know, so our biggest competitor, I don't even want to say the brand name, but they're out there. And it was started by Seth Goldman, and who started Honest Tea. And when Coca-Cola announced the discontinuation of Honest Tea, you know, I'm jumping on the bed, I'm going crazy, I'm so excited. And then like 4 months later, Seth announced that he's starting a new company, and, you know, great. So then what we realized, because of his reputation and because of the funding that he got, all these trade magazines that Jamie was talking about, like BevNet, you know, them, all started talking about iced tea and Seth's story, and that put iced tea back on the map, and it actually increased our sales, which was pretty extraordinary. So, you know, I kind of love the competition, but when it really comes down to it, you know, when you're competing with like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, we just don't have those budgets. So as far as marketing, we can't compete. What we can compete on is taste, and we are by far the best iced tea in the world. Thank you. And then also on price, which is, again, we can't really compete, which is why it's so important for us to bring our co-packing here and really get our cost of goods in order so that we can, you know.
Awesome, well said.
Thanks.
So I think I'm looking at the time here. I think I'm going to open up to the Q&A, and I just want to mention that this Q&A can be different, right? It can be a question that somebody has that somebody in the audience could answer, or it could be a question that's directed to one of the 5 people here, or maybe me or somebody else. So we want this to be interactive. Many of you might have questions. Maybe the hands are going to go up quickly. I'm going to start a little different. I'm going to pick on one person here and just kind of highlight him and ask a question, or ask him to stand up. But there's a guy named here, John Spates. So I mentioned earlier, Cooper's Cask Coffee. They take their coffee, they age it in barrels, whiskey and rum. He's out of East Greenwich. It's an amazing story. He sells at Amazon, and most of you here probably have never heard of it, but it's based here. So John, I'm going to pick on you. If you have a question maybe about retail expansion, how do you get your business going and selling into cafes? Somebody like Kelly could be a great resource for you here. If you have a question, I'm going to pick on you now and maybe stand up. I know, are we doing mics? I can pass this along. Yeah. And after John speaks, raise your hand, ask questions directly to any of the 5 here, or bring a question up that somebody in the audience can answer as well. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. Hey, Kelly, I don't know if you remember, you were in my shop
Yeah.
4 years ago, right?
Of course I do. Of course
Awesome.
I do.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so we've been direct to consumer since we started 8 years ago. Amazon's big for us. We do some web as well. I guess the question is, for distribution, what are the hardest parts to start with? Are you doing self-distribution? Do you have your own trucks when you first start out? Are you going to these small local distributors? Are you going regional right away? How did that work for your company, and what do you suggest basically for someone just getting into the retail side of the business?
Sure. Well, I mean, best margins would be if you delivered yourself, but that's way too time consuming. We tried it for a little bit. It didn't work. So I would go for, small local distributors to start, really get it going, and then, go regional, I think like Northeast Beverage would do your stuff, and Rainforest. I don't know if you've contacted them. So that would be great. And so start with the region. Once you really get it up and going and get a lot of brand recognition, then you can go national with like UNFI. But I would be more than happy to, email contacts for you or whatever needs to be done. It's tough. And like finding a really good partner and knowing what market you want to be in. So whether it's, all distributors have very specific accounts. So like some are really good for, large grocery. Some are really good for like the pizza places and the mom and pop shops. Some are really good for beaches. So really doing your research and interviewing them and making sure they're behind your brand as well, because they're going to be the ones selling it once you start doing that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Thank you all. That was excellent, and thank you, Jamie, for leading that discussion. The question I have is really geared towards Carlos and Brendan, and Lauren. The financial structures that we see in typical technology companies that scale and can go public, right? Which is very thin percentage of startups under the best of circumstances. But I'm curious if there are alternative financing structures, revenue anticipation notes, or different forms of working capital financing other than standard inventory financing or factoring receivables or stuff. Because it just seems like the exit strategies may be different here than in infinitely scalable tech companies where your incremental profits go way up, where here maybe not so much.
I'll take it. Great question. Something I've actually thought about often. A couple years ago, I was the CEO of a SPAC, which the SPAC market was a disaster, but we learned a lot through it. We raised $200 million, and one of the things that we tried to say with that was we're not a tech-based company. We're not going to be guaranteeing cash flows in 2040. We're trying to make a disruptor platform for breweries and distilleries, and what we were really looking at doing was, what is our true multiple? We want to figure out with our financing, how can we do it ourselves to the best possible ability? How can we take advantage of good interest rates at the time? And if we don't have good interest rates, how can we leverage things like refinancing our facility or our inventory, or even taking advantage of leasing instead of buying things at a certain time? What we tended to kind of see was, if we were going to be making an acquisition, leveraging our assets as much as we could so that we could get the most cash out of them. And then when we were in a more stable environment, more or less, going after things without debt. So we were kind of playing the market and having like an inverse reaction to whatever was going on is what we would try to do. And then we were fortunate where we made a decision. Our original budget for our facility was about $8 million. And it ballooned up because we wanted to take advantage of the fact that we had so many opportunities to do weddings, which was something that I never thought I would be in the business for. The interest rates at the time were almost 10%. So we found ways to work with Rhode Island Commerce Corp and self-finance, and then with the goal to get the appraisal on the property so that down the road we could take the cash out of it almost like a private equity group so that we could get our money back and then leverage what we were building so that we could kind of scale it in the public market.
So you operationally raise the cap rate by just getting those weddings in and then
Absolutely.
you can refinance it. Got it.
I mean, we look at it like how you're doing your whip inventory for spirits is really interesting because it costs about $500 to put a bottle of whiskey down. But when it comes to the retail market, it comes out at almost $8,000. But you don't want to recognize it on your balance sheet at $8,000 because you're paying the excise tax right away. So we know what our inventory is at a retail level. We know what our assets are worth and what we've put into them. And we know what our depreciation schedules are with all of our equipment. So how can we make them as low as possible or maximize them for the cap table if we want it to go to the next level?
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on, I'll say some challenges that we've had, but also how we've kind of thought about, I'll say, two sides of our business. So we're a very capital intensive business. We need infrastructure. We can grow pretty efficiently. And I would say, hindsight's 20/20, right? Like if I could have gone back and raised debt at, great rates, would have done it all day long. But you kind of have to think about your business at that point in time and how to get to the next level. And I know we're talking about like level 2 or level 3, whatever level you're at. For us, it was very much like, hey, we need to get enough capital to get our first kitchen built, right? We used a combination of equity. We did some crowdfunding. We were super, super scrappy and creative to get that first tranche over the hump. As we've gotten certain scale, we've been able to be efficient on the marketing side and maybe hiring talent and use equity dollars for that. And on the flip side, we've gotten much better at finding debt and debt partners to finance things like equipment or infrastructure. I say that now, and I feel like it's almost like a position of privilege because we didn't have like the, privilege to think like that way in the beginning. So it's super interesting, and even when we, eventually found our core investor, it ended up being, a family office, an individual. I knew I didn't want VC because I kind of went down that path. I saw how dangerous that was, and the best thing I can say to entrepreneurs out there is try to just build it with optionality. Don't rely on just, path A. You got to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like you got to have the willingness to have a whole bunch of optionality, and we still think like that today.
Could I add one more thing? I just got in my head. Very interesting fact. When we were getting our appraisal done, banks were terrified of funding a brewery distillery. But then when we changed ourselves over to a beverage manufacturing company, our appraisal almost tripled.
Interesting.
Thanks. We talked a little bit about the challenges for the second stage businesses, and I'd love to lean into that a little bit more specific to manufacturing. So we've got facilities like Hope in Maine, that's fantastic for when you're first starting out and you're doing your own batches. And then it sounds like, Carlos, you found some support for building out your own manufacturing capability over time. But what about the in-between, and what are some of the drivers that are really behind the lack of co-man in this area in particular?
So really great question here because I know that Julian, Kelly, and others can answer this, but I learned later as of today that there's something going on here that I think everybody should realize. Pretty awesome on how the different groups are working together. So I'll let them answer it, but spot on question.
Do you want me to go? Or?
Sure, you can go.
So as I was learning about the brewing and distilling, realizing that beer is pretty much made up of water, and there's a big push for CBD and hop water, and if you can make water, you can make lemonade or iced tea. So I'm actually being educated by how we can actually properly make iced tea and lemonade with the hope that we can do it ourselves in Rhode Island to help out other companies. So also just want to call out John from Cooper's Coffee because it is one of the most impressive companies I've ever seen, and they use our barrels to age their coffee. And if you're going with that much to DTC, I would just keep leaning in on it and go to Walmart and just go to the big boxes yourself.
Yes, and Brendan's actually being very modest about what he's building at Newport Craft. It's pretty extraordinary. You're going to have the capacity of Narragansett close to pretty soon. If you haven't been, go. It's cool as hell. So we would love to do our iced tea at Newport Craft, and we're working on, figuring out some equipment there. We're also working on another project in Lincoln at Plants to Food, and we've been working with Commerce and Julie and Doris and Kaylee to finance equipment to do a high-speed bottling line. We actually had really good news today, which I'm really excited. We found a line that will do 600 bottles per minute, which is like Dr. Pepper Keurig shit. So more to come on that. But so stage two, all of us were forced to leave. At least I'm only speaking to beverage right now, by the way. But we're all forced to leave, not only the state, but New England. There's nothing here. And Rhode Island has the opportunity to become the foremost premier co-packing hub for beverages. So it's really extraordinary between Plants to Food and Newport Craft. We have this incredible opportunity here.
Can I point out that our event sponsor, Orbit Motion Systems, is in the business of making that equipment? So they're here.
Hi.
Let's talk.
We need a bottling line and a cooling tunnel.
I just want to add, from what I've observed as well with the question around co-man specifically, because that might not always be your path, right? Like Feast and Fettle, you have your own facility, but co-man makes sense for a lot of brands that don't want to build out their own facility. And from someone that doesn't come from the CPG space, my observation has been so many of these entrepreneurs that come out of Hope and Maine and other places, they're very specialty. And I think that that's one of their strengths, is that they're so unique, and that's what's going to make them successful. But it requires these really expensive custom pieces of equipment. And so it seems like, I'm looking at Jamie here, but it just seems like that's the challenge, is like, is it enough to make that big investment in that piece of equipment in your own facility, or if you're a co-manufacturer? And so I think there is an opportunity. While we want to keep the jobs and the businesses here in Rhode Island, we do work collaboratively between the states, and I think there is an opportunity right now, particularly from some federal dollars that are coming through, to build more resilience writ large across the food system, to expand this mid-supply chain capacity in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, nearby. Anyway, that's an observation I have.
I also want to add too on the infrastructure is certainly needed for emerging companies that are scaling. That mid-tier infrastructure is also needed for corporate brands, big multinational corporate food and beverage brands that are producing smaller kind of distributed products and want to do these test runs. And I know we've talked about this, Julie, but I think Rhode Island is a phenomenal place for that to be the case, not only because of your location with regards to distribution, but as you think about this region, we have billion-dollar food brands that are here. You think about Panera Bread, Keurig, Dunkin', Hood Milk, Necco Wafer, Marshmallow Fluff, Teddy Peanut Butter, Polar Seltzer, Ocean Spray, Welch's. Those are all brands that are here. And as we think about them and the community that they employ and the expertise within that network and that ecosystem, tapping into that to support the development, I think, of this manufacturing facility, some of you may be in the room associated with those companies, I think is only to the community's benefit.
It's a great question, and it's actually a huge issue that I was dealing with recently too, where when you're at kind of my level where you're almost a regional brewery, you have this decision to make where packaging is always the least thought about thing, because you make the beer, that's cool, you drink it, but then what happens in between? And the big decision for a lot of brewers when you're getting of scale is, when do I get my rotary canning line? And that decision is about a $2.5 or $3 million decision, where a lot of those rotary canning lines are made overseas. So if you have something break down, you have to schedule someone to come over for 2 weeks. We decided to hold off on doing the rotary line and instead kind of customize and Frankenstein our own P.S. Angeles, which was a lot cheaper, but it's nimble. And I got the idea from going to the Alchemist in Vermont, because they're one of the most popular breweries in the country, and they run 2 parallel lines that are smaller, and it makes them nimble and able to adapt. A lot of companies, they'll listen to what SKUs are the most popular. For me, it's a 6-pack, 12-ounce SKU. That seems like it's something very reasonable to make. If I want to get into New York and I want to get into all the small delis, that's what I have to make. But it has to be at a certain price point. A lot of people forget about the labor that goes into that. And there's been several breweries that have just buried themselves because they leaned in on it, and they're losing money every time they make these popular beers. So where we're going to invest in is like an automatic packer for that, which is a $100,000 decision. But that'll make my life a lot easier while I scale up to that kind of second tier than spending $3 million on a rotary line.
Thank you to all of the panelists, to Jamie, to, for you're just creating such a great collegial community in Rhode Island, because you saw Julie's, slide at the beginning. That was, food is complicated, and, you have really made it so easy to link arms and, have thought partners. And when you say competition makes us better, community also lifts us all up. And I think that's so much what I see tonight. I have a question for anyone who wants to field it. They say the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So I wonder if any of you see things on the landscape now, in the food landscape, that you think, wow, that's like the future. That's the future of where this industry is going. I'm curious what you might, how you would respond to that.
I'll do a quick one on this. You hear a lot about, and we were just talking about this, particularly like automation. And I think you kind of see a lot of the sexier sweet greens, fully automated. You walk in and this robot makes your salad. And I think there's a lot of great that comes out of things like that. But I when it comes to the future and automation, I always think about the fact that we are all food businesses, and I'll speak on behalf of Feast and Fettle. You're consumer facing. You're a hospitality brand, and you cannot forget that, because if you want to continue to be, I don't want to use the word niche, but I'll say niche or premium, or it's a lot harder for us, I think, Rhode Island-based businesses to charge a premium. We don't necessarily have that scale or national awareness. I think that you have to lean into hospitality first, and then think about what type of automation can supplement whether it's your manufacturing business or your operations. And we think about that a lot. We're making a lot of food, and there's a lot of humans involved. And there's a time and a place for implementing the right automation and the direction of the future. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Don't forget you're a hospitality business, because I think we can get carried away with here's where we're going in the future. This is what it's all going to be. We're all going to I've seen the robots on campuses delivering food. That's cool, but there could be a race to the bottom depending on what type of business you're in.
Oh, next. So we think a lot at Branch Venture Group when we're looking at investment opportunities that align with population change and population trends. And I think that one of the trends that presents, I think, the most opportunity for consumer product investing is really sort of looking at emerging kind of ethnic communities in the U.S. So we know that the Latin American population in the U.S. is the fastest growing population and will be for the next 40 years. And so as we think about, what are the products that are, raising awareness about sort of those flavors, those ingredients that may be familiar, may be different for this, kind of standard kind of grocery options that we have. We believe that, products like that not only resonate with the community in which they've originated, but also people that travel and want to share those experiences and want to share those new foods that they've discovered with themselves, with their communities. And so I think that those communities are already here. I think we have a lot to learn from them in terms of diversity of food, in terms of production of food, to not lose those traditional ways of making those really unique kind of cultural foods. And so, there's plenty of examples, but I think the democratization of, kind of unique foods from around the world is something that I'm really interested in seeing grow here, especially in New England.
And I would say that future is here, right? What Hope in Maine is doing is a national model. What Farm Fresh Rhode Island is doing is a national model. There's so many other examples. I hope all of your businesses are around in 50 years. I don't know. I don't know what success looks like to you if you sell and you make a lot of money, right? But we want to keep these jobs, these opportunities here in Rhode Island. And so what I think is really exciting is in such a low margin industry to have these intermediaries that are nonprofits, to be honest, supporting for-profit businesses and creating job opportunities and economic prosperity where disadvantaged low-income communities wouldn't have seen another option. And Lisa, you always talk about how like food is the first business, right? And there was a program during COVID to support new entrepreneurs, Dish Up RI, right? And the community navigator program, I think, right? And you told me that food businesses were the majority of businesses that were created, right? Because oftentimes it comes from your background, right? It's something you know how to cook, right? But how do you turn it into a business? And so I think that that's a really exciting model, a nonprofit intermediary that's creating opportunities for businesses, for decades to come.
Hi, thanks for coming in today. Some great information. I have a quick question, though. As I'm beginning to scale up my business from the startup into that secondary piece, and my thought is always to create a brand, to get it to X, and then pass it on to perhaps a PE or VC purchase, buy it from me. I heard people talking about a multiple. What is the criteria to create to assign a multiple to a business? What are those PE people or venture capitalists looking at to purchase, let's say a $50 million gross business? Are they looking at net? Are they looking at physical assets? What do I need to do to position my brand so that I can bring it up and then have them say your multiple is X? How do I figure that piece out, if that makes sense?
I guess I'll start. So typically when we're talking about the value of a company and how to understand the value of a company, I mean, at the earliest phases of development with which we're looking, it's looking at the market, it's looking at the growth of it, it's looking at comps in the market, what other companies, what we can find on other companies as it relates to their fundraisers, their valuations. And, again, working with good legal counsel and the entrepreneur to establish that is a big part of what we spend a lot of time doing because, again, we're often the first money into a lot of the companies. And through the vehicles that we invest in, sometimes there's not even a valuation for the business, right? We mostly invest through convertible notes or safes, which are, two types of investment vehicles that don't always have a company valuation associated with them because, and I think that's actually quite right for this, period of time that a lot of companies are in when we see them because they're still figuring out so much about the business, right? Are they, a direct consumer brand and will they be for the next 5 years? Are they, looking at different sales channels, both in food service and in retail at the onset of their business? so I think that there's still a lot to figure out that then determines what ultimately the valuation of the business can be. But when you start scaling and getting to the point where you're looking to be acquired or get more substantial investment and set the valuation of the company, there's a lot more that kind of goes into it. And I think it really comes down to what type of company you want to build. And I think the type of company you want to build ultimately dictates then, the funding that you need to be able to get there. But the exit opportunity, the acquisition opportunity is often just a multiple of revenue. So what can you get your revenues to be able to sell, to a strategic buyer or, someone in the industry that may be bringing in your brand to diversify their own series of products in market. And I would say from an acquisition potential, we've spoken with a number of businesses. They might not be as big as Kraft Heinz or General Mills that have a lot of M&A activity, but it tends to be much later stage brand, right? They're looking at $50 to $100 million brands to acquire to add to the portfolio. But there's a lot of younger companies, or I should say earlier, companies more in the middle, mid-tier businesses, I suppose, that aren't doing those kinds of multi-billion-dollar revenues, but they may be doing multi-million-dollar revenues. And so bringing in a brand that can offer $20 to $30 million in incremental revenue to the business may be worth it for them and to help them diversify and get into other markets. So it's an art and a science, I think, coming up with that approach, but good investors can help you figure that out.
I think really quickly, I use a weight. EBITDA multiplier would be key. Things like, for us, how many cases of spirits did you sell? And assigning a value like $1,000 per case. How many barrels produced? So assigning a multiple of that, but then also the human factor. What makes this business different? If you have Ryan Reynolds selling your tequila company, what is that going to do for you in the market? How many social media followers do you have? What demographics are you engaged with? There's an art to it, I think, a lot more than a science, because there's only so much of things that are certainty, and EBITDA is definitely certainty because you can see what the true value of the business is. But then that X factor, and I think really what makes good VCs and good private equity companies different is being able to know the art of it, being able to find someone in the beginning of the runway, like Fisher's Island Lemonade, for example. Amazing company, so jealous of what they've accomplished, and they're already beyond successful, but that is a great acquisition because that can be a national brand. And I'm sure a lot of it went into the fact outside of the EBITDA that they were doing, which might have been low because they were co-packing, what they've built and what it could do in the future.
Yeah, I'll quickly chime in on that. It's interesting the kind of play between, we talk about this a lot at Feast and Fettle, the play between growth and profitability, and in conjunction where you are in kind of the macroeconomic cycle, and in conjunction in terms of what type of buyer you're looking for. So, all else equal, typically a strategic is going to be willing to pay a little bit more than a traditional private equity company, which will look at an EBITDA multiple. So they might focus on profitability a little bit more. So it's not just top line revenue; it's the top line revenue coupled with your growth rate, coupled with where you are on the profitability track. So it's complex, but the valuation is what you can get somebody to pay, essentially. There's a big you component of it as well. So you kind of got to be a salesman.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions, and I think we're going to ask panelists, only one or two of you respond just for the sake of time. But do you have a question?
Hi, I'll stand up. Probably not stranger to most of you, definitely not most of the panelists. Here, Mariana with Little Maven Lemonade, and I first want to apologize. I should have had a table here today, but I have no product left after I got picked up by a distributor after struggling for 2 years to finally get that done. Don't clap. I don't have product to sell the distributor. I don't have how to produce my product. There's nothing here to clap about this. Thank you. And to piggyback on Laura's point, just I think last week, Bloomberg came out with numbers. Funding for companies for Black women and Black business in general is down 88% last year and 67% for Latino entrepreneurs like myself. So Don't clap for that, please. One of the struggles that we have with co-packing and co-manufacturing is very significant, and I've been relying on bothering all the folks at Granny Squibs for quite some time, Maggie here too as well. But I did hear one comment from the panel, Julie, from you saying that you do have some efforts into working interstate. And I think one of the issues that I have, like I've been working with a company out of Attleboro, Massachusetts, to build, they already have a facility, and we are working on possibly moving there, getting them moving, getting them funding, and would be a great location. And I have asked several times, including the governor's office, is there any chance or any possibility that this could be an interstate venture and support to get us at least from where we are now to production while Rhode Island build its infrastructure? And the answer continues to be no. So it seems to be the majority of our problems too is, where does the buck stop in this conversation? Because I've been waiting 3 years, 4 years. I've made proposals of putting facilities into the state. I brought in players and ideas. And to now hear you say that that is a possibility, but somebody else in the office is saying it's not. How does that communication works, and what is it true and what is not, and how do we grow, how do we move it from here to actually be able to produce, to scale, to grow in a way that all the agencies are talking, that we as entrepreneurs are aware of what's going on, and actually make an effort to grow and then bring everything back to Rhode Island? How do we get there, and can this really happen in the interstate level? Because I'm now talking to a co-packer in Canada. It shouldn't be that way. How can we get this work done? And in terms of funding as well, one of the mistakes and one of the issues that has happened for me, Laura was talking about safe notes and different kind of funding. I just found out that I cannot get a safe note because my advisor through the state told me, open an LLC, you are a small business. I'm not a small business, I'm a startup. I want to be national and international. We are now selling in London. We are an international company, but keep being looked at and supported as a little small business in Rhode Island. Now I cannot get the funding that was proposed to me because I'm an LLC. I have to change. Talking to the advisor, they changed it to a C Corp, which is still not the right thing. So all those mistakes when we are talking about supporting and advising are things that really shouldn't happen and make us super, super tired. So it makes you wonder, do you want to keep going? And then when you take a step back and you realize it's not about what we can do, our business not succeeding, is that sometimes there are things that are not being communicated between agencies and support and funding or advisors that are leading us in the wrong direction. How can we all get on the same page and really make this happen for all of us who are here today struggling with our production and growth? Thank you.
I know your story, but I'm glad you shared with others. Yeah, I think you're sharing some of the pain points, right, that we need to resolve, and I'm hopeful that a lot of the partners in the room, right, can work together to try to figure out what's possible. I think some of the struggle is we don't have great models to look towards, right, and our the state, when it comes to state funding, those mechanisms are funded ultimately by the legislature, right? And so it's always kind of this check and balance of how do we think beyond the funding mechanism of Rhode Island's border, right? To think collaboratively. But I think that we could potentially look to other sectors to learn from. And one is actually offshore wind. So Rhode Island being small is we have to think collaboratively as a region, also within life sciences. And so I want to work with our partners to think about outside of the box a little bit about what does that look like at a regional level so that we can continue to drive wealth and create opportunities for job growth and entrepreneurs here in the state, but think the way that the food system works, right? All of you are not thinking about just selling within Rhode Island, right? You're thinking regional, national. All the distributors are thinking about the Northeast, the North Atlantic, right? They have people that do that work in that area, and so I don't have an answer for you, but we need to figure it out, right? And And I think that we can do that through this collaboration effort. Yeah. We'll keep trying.
Great question.
I think that exactly what you're saying, Julie, like this collaboration is so important. And Mariana, I bring up Little Maven Lemonade in every single co-packing meeting I'm in because our companies are in the same spot, just like a lot of other beverage brands. And it just highlights the lack of co-packing in New England. I'm really happy you're looking in Massachusetts while I focus in Rhode Island and we can collaborate. But I think there's a lot of discussions that need to happen around this, and so I'll call you later. Yes.
Dividend that is paid by supporting these small businesses, particularly from underserved, underestimated communities, is almost not quantifiable for what it would do for our state, for our region. And so we have to think about it a little differently than we need X piece of infrastructure, which we don't have yet. We need affordable infrastructure, and that's what's going to help everything to continue to grow.
Good. So I'm going to throw a little curveball here. It's the last question. So just do things a little differently here. Danny, if it's all right, can I call on you? So I'm really proud that Danny Warshay is here. He's, as I mentioned, the executive director of the Nelson Center of Entrepreneurship. He also wrote the book See, Solve, and Scale. You've seen so many businesses come through here, and I'm going to throw out one, which is Runa Tea, right? So share with us quickly, this is the last question. I'm going to ask an audience question, a person in the audience. And so the question to you, Danny, is, through all your experience of all the businesses, and Runa Tea, for example, because they started here and they left, what insights do you have over the many years? Things have changed since Runa started, or Pre-Mom, or all these businesses. What can you share with the audience just from your insights on, how to keep businesses here and thrive in Rhode Island?
Well, I'm usually the one cold calling, so it's nice to get a cold call. First of all, thank you for all that you've done to put this event on. I'd say the thing that's usually surprising, and I don't know if it relates to any of what you've experienced, is the key to keeping people here, I think, is less to do with the business per se, and much more to do with this, the community, the infrastructure, camaraderie, the fact that you're willing to work with competitors. And so, I think we heard a taste of that from all of you, and that I think was here a little bit in the days of Runa and Pre-Mama, but I think that's what's so wonderful about Rhode Island, and also in particular about the people in this room. So I think that's the secret. Rhode Island has advantage because of its small scale. The third word in the title of my book is scale, with the intention of growing to be very big. But I think the nature of what's really special about Rhode Island is its small scale. And so, I hope as we look and have ambition to grow and to get bigger, we don't lose the intimacy that you see in this room, and that Innovate Newport is creating, and that I think is inherent in all of what you heard in the panelists here. So, I think that's really what's remarkable about Rhode Island. And you're right, I've been involved, I guess, for longer than I can realize. But since I was an entrepreneur at Brown as a history concentrator, and falling into the tech industry and building a business that we sold to Apple. This was in the late 80s, and sometimes I have to remind my students that there were computers in the late 80s. But, and then I did spend a decent amount of my career in the food industry, in the natural foods industry. I always remember back in the early 80s when I was part of that startup that we built and sold to Apple. We were mutants. Nobody looked like us. There was no such thing as entrepreneurship. I mean, what you've done in Hope in Maine is extraordinary. What so many of the people in this room and throughout Rhode Island have done is extraordinary. And so, you know, it's like night and day compared to what it felt like when I was a college student starting out. And so, you look at the sponsors and you look at the advocacy from the state of Rhode Island. None of that existed not too long ago. So I think there's really huge momentum that is possible to continue to carry forward. And, you know, Runa is just one example, but, and when I say the infrastructure and community, when I ask my students, what will keep you, my Brown students, who are starting extraordinary businesses, what will keep you in Rhode Island, they talk a lot less about business infrastructure, or tax rates, or funding, or, you know, even manufacturing. What's on their mind is much more about quality of life and, you know, bike lanes in the roads and easy transportation from the train station to where they're living, or commuter rail to Boston if they want to live there. And so I think Rhode Island has a lot of advantages of quality of life. In fact, people my age who are moving to Rhode Island are not moving to Rhode Island because of the attraction of business issues. They're moving to Rhode Island again because of this. You don't see this in big cities. You don't see people who know each other for many years collaborating in much bigger contexts. You see it in a place like Rhode Island where we all do know each other. You know, it's two sides of the same coin, I always say to people who are thinking about moving their businesses to Rhode Island. The scale is not as massive as at Kendall Square or the Research Triangle or Austin, Texas, but that's a really good thing because we do know each other and we're all a phone call away or a text away maybe these days. And so, you're right, having seen the trajectory of entrepreneurship building in Rhode Island for I guess about 40 years, it's good to see Rhode Island has retained that intimacy and I think is building on it and is enabling people to come to these kinds of events and, you know, over a Granny Squibb's iced tea right after, a lot of business can be done and a lot of entrepreneurship can propel new ventures forward. So I hope that's a reasonable perspective. I didn't expect a cold call, but happy to share that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. This concludes our event, almost. I want to thank Jamie so much. Thank panelists. For sharing a bit about your story, your background, your expertise, your advice. So appreciate your time. I hope that everyone will follow up with connections. That's why we're here. I do want to call up Jen. We have a little raffle from our event sponsor, Orbit Motion System. Do you want to say anything? What are they getting?
It's just a small little basket, but it is full of Rhode Island goodies. So.
Awesome. All right, so stick around. Here's the drum roll.
Doris Blanchard.
Okay. So you can claim your basket with Bethany. I do just want to point out our next events in the series. So our next event is on the med tech industry on March 14th here. We will have Aidan Petrie from NEMIC, which is New England Medical Innovation Center, will be leading that panel. It'll be a similar model where we have exhibit tables of startups as well as a panel discussion. So hope to see you back in March. Thank you.
Hold up one second. Everybody sit down for a sec, real quick. There's plenty of food and there's beer here. I just want to end with a quote. There's a quote that I saw on LinkedIn recently. I just want to end with this. Some of you may have heard this quote, but I think it's very, very relevant for all of you today. Winston Churchill once said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." And I think the courage that all of you today, the entrepreneurs that are here in the audience, it's really about the courage to continue. So appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you so much. And mingle for a little bit. Bye.